Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenithan and welcome to today's video for Legends of Runeterra. We're continuing on with spoiler season. So we got a new champion today. Also new cards, of course. Non-Shurima this time. Today we have Freljord cards. And today's champion that has been spoiled is Lissandra. Lots of interesting stuff to unpack here. So let's go and take a quick look at what Lissandra brings to the game. All right, here we go. First impressions of Lissandra. I think her stat line is very small. But hopefully her abilities and her text helps that out. So let's read her really quick. Lissandra is a 3-mana 2/3 with tough. Tough is nice because 2/3 is a bad stat line, so it helps her out with her survivability. So she doesn't die to things like get excited or, I don't know, gotcha, I guess. When I'm summoned, summon a Frozen Thrall. What is a Frozen Thrall? Well, we can just look right below. A Frozen Thrall is a 1-mana landmark, countdown 8, big countdown. Summon a Frost Guard Thrall. And right next to the Frozen Thrall, we can see what Frost Guard Thrall is. The Thrall is an 8-mana 8/8 with Overwhelm. So if you somehow are able to have the Frozen Thrall pop out the Frostguard Thrall, that's really good. An 8-mana 8/8 Overwhelm, sure, you probably wouldn't play that in your deck, but it's still a fairly big stat line, and sure, sometimes all you need is just a big beater. And thanks to Overwhelm, it will end the game in a relatively quick pace, if this pops out. So for Lissandra to level up, though, you have to have summoned 2 allies that cost 8 or more. And when she levels up, you get to create a Watcher in hand. We'll talk about the Watcher really quick. But first off, I'd like to say I think her level up is easy to achieve. One, she doesn't have to actually see these 8 costs or more allies get summoned, so that's always a good thing. Champions love it when they don't have to actually see something go off to level up, so she can level up in the deck or in your hand, so that's nice. And it's not that difficult thanks to the Frozen Thrall. Um, Also, I guess technically Feel the Rush would just auto level her because I assume Lissandra would count herself if she was somehow. Actually, no. Lissandra would still be 3 mana. Never mind. I guess yeah, Feel the Rush wouldn't auto level her. Sorry, I was thinking for some reason I was confusing cost and like health or something. Anyway, though, what is the Watcher really quick? We can see here on the bottom right, Watcher is a 17 mana 11/17. So you're not actually going to cast this card normally because, well, you can't get to 17 mana. So let's look at the card. I cost 0 if you summon 4 allies that cost 8 this game. Attack, obliterate the enemy deck. I've seen some people already saying this is kind of like Fiora, where if Fiora kills 4 things, she wins the game. Sure, I see the analogy where if you are somehow able to summon this for 0 mana, you're in a good spot. Yes, I agree. However, I will say because it has to attack to obliterate the enemy deck, that is where I'm going to say it's not as good as a Fiora who just has win the game. Sure, it's probably easier to summon, I guess, than it is to kill 4 things with Fiora, but even then, I think it's a good card, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't play this kind of card in my deck, but getting this from a leveled up Shyvana is pretty nice. And since the hand disruption in the game at the moment is only Hunt the Weak, I believe that's the card, in Noxus, and it only targets the weakest card in the enemy hand, Watcher is probably not going to get discarded. You're probably going to easily play Watcher if you are able to stall long enough to get that 4 other 8 cost allies to be summoned, which isn't too tough thanks to the Frozen Thrall. Again, like I said. Now the problem is if you summon this and your opponent, say, a Shadow Isles deck, Shadow Isles control, and they just Vengeance this, then you're very sad. Not terribly sad because it's a 0 mana card and they spend a 7 mana Vengeance on a 0 mana card. Sure, you would love to attack with this to obliterate their deck and just kind of pseudo auto win the game because of how the game works with mill. And if there's no cards left in your deck and you try to draw, you just lose the game. And if your opponent doesn't have 2 champions to refill their deck, then they'll just lose. So that's kind of nice. Or I guess Go Hard could refill the deck and other such things. But still, I see that a lot of people are going to have fun with this card. Off the top of my head, there's already a couple of synergistic cards, a little bit of synergy you can do with this card. Without having to summon 8 cost allies, you can sort of cheat this out with things like Revitalizing Roar when you're at 10 mana, or I guess Spectral Matron from Shadow Isles to make a copy of it that's ephemeral. That's kind of cute too. I've seen some people even say, how about Targon's Peak? I mean, it works. Don't get me wrong. Targon's Peak on Watcher will work, but then you're playing a Targon's Peak deck and ew. It's like there's kind of anti-synergy with Targon's Peak and Lissandra. Like the allies you'll be summoning with Targon's Peak won't necessarily cost 8 or more mana because of the discount, so they won't actually level up Lissandra. So that's a little finicky with the synergy, but I see why you would do that because of Watcher, and it's cute, but I don't think you should try to cheat out Watcher too hard. I feel like it's just best to just be like, it's Frozen Thrall, etc., etc. Also, let's go back to talking about Lissandra. Leveled up Lissandra, what does she do? She is still tough, and she's now a 3/4, which is expected. But your Nexus is now tough. This is the first card ever, I believe, that actually does something to the Nexus that's not just changing around the health, aka healing the Nexus or damaging the Nexus. I like this. This is a kind of effect I've wanted a long time in the game, basically sort of armor. Obviously, it's not armor as in like Hearthstone armor, but it helps out the Nexus and it helps keep you safe. Now, the problem is, this is not a permanent effect, I believe. I feel like your Nexus, if I'm reading this correctly, this means your Nexus is only tough while the leveled up Lissandra is on the field. So obviously your opponent can just kill Lissandra and your Nexus is no longer tough. She still summons the Frozen Thrall when she's summoned, so that's nice. Rounds start, create a fleeting 0-cost Ice Shard in hand. We can see over there on the right, Ice Shard is a 3-mana fast spell that says deal 1 to everything, so that includes Nexus. So there's a little bit of synergy there. Your Nexus is tough, so it won't technically take damage from the Ice Shard. I don't think Ice Shard itself is a good card, and it has a rarity gem, so you could put it in your deck if you want. I don't think you should put it in your deck. It's just not worth it. Why would you play this card when you could play, like, I don't know, Avalanche or something? I guess if you want to get Plunder synergy, so you want to hit the Nexus, but I feel like there's just better ways to do that. Also, let's take a quick look at her champion spell. I think her champion spell is bad, first off. First impressions. 5 mana, Lissandra's Entomb, 5 mana fast spell, obliterate a unit, and summon a Frozen Tomb in its place. A Frozen Tomb is a 0 mana landmark that says countdown to summon an exact copy of the obliterated unit I replace. I forgot the name of the card we looked at when we were looking at Talia, but there was a 2 mana one that kind of did this as well. So I don't understand this card. I see what they're trying to do with this card. It's supposed to be like sort of a tempo hit, if you will. Against your opponent, you will obliterate a problematic unit to buy yourself a couple of turns, but the countdown too is just, I don't think it's buying enough time for a 5 mana card. I really think this card is just too expensive. Sure, if it was cheaper, maybe like at 4 mana, I could see myself maybe considering this card in my deck. But at 5 mana, I think the only way you will see this card get played is if it's a second copy of Lissandra. In other words, for example, it's like you got a Lissandra on field and you have a second Lissandra in hand and you're like, well, I got nothing better to do, so I'll play Entomb. That's the only way I see yourself playing this kind of card. In other words, this card is bad, in my opinion. Sure, I guess you could also try to get some value by obliterating a friendly unit that has a good summon ability, like, I don't know, Shadow Assassin or Avaros and Hearthguard. Uh, I guess there's some synergy where you can technically entomb Lissandra herself, and she'll pop back out and give you another Frozen Thrall. That's kind of cool, but I don't think that's worth actually putting Entomb in your deck. Like I said, the ability and the effect's not a bad effect. It's just too expensive, and I think the only way you will see this card is if your opponent, if it's an actual Lissandra, in other words, that's been transformed in this card. Next up, what is the card we haven't talked about yet? We've talked about Ice Shard, we've talked about Frozen Thrall, Draklorn Inquisitor. I've seen a lot of people say this card is busted and nuts. I don't think this card is OP. I think it's strong, and I think it is a good cog in the machine, if you will. It's a good play, not a playmaker, but it's it does its job, but it's not very flashy, if that makes sense. It does have a flashy-ish ability, but this is not the card you're going to get mad at. You're going to get mad at other cards, in other words, if this card is good. Let's read the card real quick before I keep talking too much about it. It is a 5-mana 4/5. Okay stats for the cost. Not great. Usually you're looking for 5/5s for 5 mana. 4/5s are usually around 4 mana, but its ability is good. When I'm summoned, summon a Frozen Thrall. You already know what Frozen Thrall is, the 1 mana landmark that summons 8/8s. Round end, and this is the big thing. Round end, if the countdown of any of your Frozen Thralls is 4 or less, advance them to 0. That is why people are saying this card is OP. I think this is a very good card. That's a great effect. And if this kind of Lissandra Frozen Thrall deck is going to be a thing, it's because of the Inquisitor. Now, does that mean if you're playing against Lissandra and your opponent plays Inquisitor, are you obligated to kill the Inquisitor? Not right away, obviously, unless their Thrall is going to crack open, sure. But I feel like you will feel bad if you're wasting removal on the Inquisitor. Because even if you remove the Inquisitor with a kill spell, and you're probably it's gonna be tough because 4/5 is a good stat line. It dodges a lot of removal, dodges Culling Strikes, dodges Grasp, Mystic Shots. You're gonna have to use a big-ish removal here, like a Vengeance or a Thermogenic Beam, or I guess a buffed up Tri-Beam. And if you do that, then you're gonna have also a tough time with the Frostguard Thrall that's coming up. So again, if this card or this archetype, this deck, whatever you want to call it, this strategy is good, it's because of the Inquisitor, not because of the other cards. Sure, Lissandra will help out, but really it's going to be Inquisitor who's pulling the weight. Now, the next card. This card is actually nuts. 3 Sisters, 1 mana burst spell. We've been getting a lot of 1 mana burst spells that are very powerful this set, I've noticed, by the way. 1 mana burst spell, create a fleeting flash freeze, Fury of the North, or Entomb in hand. This is nuts. Sure, yes, the card is fleeting, but you're paying an extra 1 mana for the what is it called? The utility, the flexibility of having these 3 spells. And all 3 of these spells are okay. Sorry. Sure, Entomb's kind of meh, and I really don't want to have to get Entomb. But Flash Freeze and Fury. Flash Freeze is the 3 mana freeze a unit. Fury is 4 mana +3/+4 at burst speed. Those 2 spells are pretty good. And like I said, you're paying that extra 1 mana for flexibility. You might be against whatever, and you're like, oh, I need to freeze this here because that's really scary because my opponent's playing I don't know, Atrocity. And they're trying to Atrocity to kill you. Okay, 3 Sisters, grab Flash Freeze the card. Looks good. Or it's like, oh, they're trying to win a combat here. Okay, 3 Sisters, Fury of the North, play Fury on my unit, probably won the combat. Or, oh no, that's a very scary unit that they're playing that I have to at least buy some time and get rid of for at least now. Entomb. Also, Entomb technically is like a pseudo-silence. Not really a pseudo-silence, but it gets rid of buffs is what I'm trying to say. So let's say your opponent was playing Veiled Temple, or maybe they're just playing Targon in general, and they're getting a lot of buffs on stuff. Play Entomb, get rid of those buffs. No more Aphelios with like a bunch of health because of things like Sunblessed Vigor and Temple triggers. So that's nice. I think this is honestly the best card out of all of these cards, is what I'm going to say. I'd say in terms of my 3 best cards here before we talk about the rest of the cards, it's probably Three Sisters is the best, then the Inquisitor, and then Lissandra. The other cards are kind of meh. Speaking of meh, I don't know about this next card. Blighted Ravine, 4 mana landmark. When I'm summoned, heal your Nexus for 4. That's a fairly large chunk of healing. Countdown 1, deal 2 to everything. In other words, at the start of the next turn, deal 2 to everything, including Nexus, of course. So, cool. I'd honestly rather just play Avalanche, though. I guess the healing is nice. But the difference is Avalanche gets rid of things right away. And you can also play Avalanche on turn 3 thanks to spell mana. Meanwhile, this, I don't know. You're also giving your opponent a whole turn to prepare. By the time you play this, when you play this, sure, it goes off the next turn, but your opponent has the rest of that turn to prepare, whether that's not playing anything else, playing some kind of buffs to get things out of the 2 health range, or just, I don't know, destroying your landmark or whatever if they can. And in that case, if they somehow destroyed your landmark, you just played a 4 mana heal 4, which is terrible. But I like the landmark. I've talked about this kind of card before where I was like, oh, I would love a landmark that says, like, play the landmark, countdown, whatever. When it gets destroyed, deal some damage to all units. Or maybe even destroy all units on the field. This is it, but I wish it was a little bit stronger. Just a little bit. Maybe like deal 3 instead of deal 4. Because this is coming out at the earliest, ignoring any ramp, turn 5. Turn 5, 2 damage to everything. Sure, it hits Nexus, which is okay, but eh. Like against a burn deck, you taking 2 damage is kind of painful. I guess it heals you too to try to offset that 2 damage you're dealing to yourself, but still, this is a very tough card for me to evaluate. I just don't think it's good enough compared to Avalanche. That's a problem. Maybe if there's some landmark synergies in Freljord, maybe. Sure, we have Frozen Thrall, and you can actually put Frozen Thrall in your deck because there's a rarity gem at the bottom, which signifies you can put it in your deck. So that is your cheap landmark if you want a cheap landmark, but this is still okay. I wouldn't be surprised to see people playing Blighted Ravine. I don't think it's good enough, though, in my opinion. Now, speaking of not good enough, we have a bad card next, in my opinion. Cold Resistance, 5 mana burst speed spell. Get an empty mana gem and grant an ally +0/+2. It's a permanent buff, so that's nice, but why would you play this card when Catalyst is a thing? Catalyst is the 5 mana, also gain an empty mana gem, and instead heal your Nexus for 3. I guess technically against a control deck, Cold Resistance is better, but I feel like more often than not, you would rather have the heal from Catalyst because outside of control, even mid-range decks are going to be dealing damage and you'll want the healing. So the dream is, I would say, like, you have a unit on board. They attack in, you use Cold Resistance to keep your unit alive. I guess you could also technically buff, like, Warding Stone and make a 0/5 that ramps you, but I don't know. I just don't think this card's good enough compared to Catalyst. If this was the only kind of ramp that ramped like this, sure. But we have Catalyst of Aeons, and I just really feel like this is going to take a backseat to Catalyst and maybe only see play in Expedition and never see play in Constructed. Maybe, again, of course, randomly generated spells, sure, but I don't think this is playable at the moment. Maybe in the future, if there's some kind of rotation and we don't have Catalyst anymore, sure. If you want to play Ramp, sure, this is still okay. But the other problem I see is you want to play this on turn 3, like you want to play Catalyst on turn 3. To do that, you have to bank 2 mana in your first 2 turns. So either you're skipping turn 2 and playing a 1-drop on 1, or skipping turn 1 and playing a 1-drop on 2. In which case, you're giving a 1-drop +0/+2? That's not amazing. Like, that's really not amazing. And I guess if you can argue, like, what if you don't play this on turn 3? What if you play it later? Sure, but then you're kind of, like, if you're not playing this early, what's the point of playing ramp at all, right? I don't know. I just really can't see this really that good, like, and seeing play compared to Kyle's. Because even in the, like, let's say look at the late game at turn 10 or 10 mana. This card is a 5 mana Sunblessed Vigor. Sunblessed Vigor is 2 mana +0/+2 in Tarkin. You're paying an extra 3 mana on Sunblessed Vigor for potential ramp. Sunblessed Vigor is playable, but sometimes it gets cut because sometimes the meta is not good for it. Right now, it's good because you like to protect Aphelios and TF, but this is just too much mana for not enough. Maybe I could see maybe this getting played if it wasn't necessarily an empty mana gem, but a full mana gem. So in theory, it's kind of like you get a 1 mana refund. So it's sort of like Attune, pseudo Attune, if you will. But for now, as it is, I don't think this card is playable. And then we have Watcher. We already talked about Watcher, though. So that's all the cards that have been spoiled today. Very fun. I kind of really like this archetype that they're trying to push of, like, I don't know, slow, explosive countdown right here, which is with the Frozen Thralls and Frostguard Thralls. I definitely will try out Lissandra. Besides being a cutie and a waifu, she just seems like a lot of fun. Sure, her stat line's a little small for a 3-drop, and I'm a little worried because I like Lulu, even though Lulu is a bad card. She's a very fun card, and one of the reasons she's so bad is because she's a 3-mana 2/3. That, and you have to attack in with Lulu, and a 3-mana 2/3 attacking in usually dies. Lissandra doesn't have to attack in. She can just sit back and do whatever. She doesn't really do much, though, after she's been summoned. She just sits there as a 3-mana 2/3 tough, which is kind of mediocre. I don't know. I kind of wish she had, like, one more stat point. Whether it's making her a 3/3 or a 2/4 is what I would like, but I think she's okay enough. I just don't know what kind of deck would want to play her is the problem. Like, what kind of cards will you play to get the whole 8-cost thing to go off? Behold with Trundle, maybe? I doubt you'll play like Lissandra Tryndamere. That doesn't seem to be that synergistic. So I don't know. And what secondary region would you like? Shadow Isles, maybe? I feel like we're gonna have to see more stuff. I've already seen some people saying like Lissandra Talia. Again, I see the synergy. The problem is you're limited on board space. You don't want to have a board full of just landmarks and be forced to start destroying your own landmarks before their countdown actually goes off. So just remember that when you're theory crafting. Anyway, though, that's going to be it for today. Lovely card. I love what they have done with Lissandra. I'm struggling to think of a deck to build and put her in, but if you have any ideas, I would love to hear it. If you guys just enjoyed the video in general, of course, I would love if you guys could leave a comment or a like down below. Of course, always really helps me out. And if you guys want to keep up with the Legends of Runeterra content, you can always subscribe to the channel as well to keep up with the content. And if you guys want to watch me play some of the game and some Legends of Runeterra, you can always go and check me out at my Twitch TV account at twitch.tv/Xenaton. I stream this card game pretty much every single day. Anyway, though, with that all said and done, thank you all again once more for watching this video, and until I see you guys in the next one, bye!